Hey all, here OS Reviews. Today we're taking a quick look at an Apple Watch Ultra clone that I found on Temu for just $8. So if you're unfamiliar, Temu is a relatively new e-commerce site that can be thought of as the new Wish.com mixed with AliExpress. Some of their novelty items can be quite interesting to explore. At least one thing that Temu has going for them is the shipping speed is not bad. From an item being shipped from China, it only takes about 1 to 2 weeks to arrive. So of course, Apple products being extremely popular have tons of derivatives, which we don't necessarily endorse or really recommend, but it does offer you a similar looking watch, at least from afar, at a fraction of the cost. The real Ultra selling for $800, it's pretty expensive versus again under 10 bucks. I'll also mention that when exploring, I did find another model that's about twice the price, almost $18. However, it has a AMOLED or OLED display instead of IPS LCD. Since functionality is exactly the same aside from the screen, I opted for the cheaper version. But it is worth mentioning that, again, if you do want a slightly higher quality display, there is a slightly more premium variant, and kind of ridiculous that you can find OLED screen watches now for such a low price point. For those unfamiliar, OLED enables functions like an always-on display mode, as well as better contrast and brightness, as well as vibrancy of colors that it's able to reproduce. Regardless, taking a look at some of the advertisements here, it claims to have a 2.02-inch HD display, uses wireless charging, has a built-in microphone even for answering phone calls, using the voice assistant, heart rate monitor, step counting, pretty typical stuff, and even claims to have an actual functioning rotating crown, which is a detail that a lot of cheaper clones in the past have often just omitted to save on cost. It also has what they claim as an alloy frame as well. Like most low-cost smartwatches, the battery life is going to be a little bit longer than the real thing because the OS is much more limited in what you can do, but it should last around 7 days on a full charge. And then some of the other claims are a little bit more questionable, such as blood pressure monitoring and ECG monitoring, since these sensors tend to be a lot more expensive, probably won't be super accurate there. Also claims to have sleep tracking and blood oxygen monitoring. It has an IP68 water resistant rating, so not quite as deep as something like 5ATM, but should be splash proof and rain proof, and also kind of the app that it uses for syncing for iOS or Android. So here's a box. It actually says T800 Ultra. Interestingly, this wasn't in the title of the listing. So it looks like on Temu, they won't often put the brand and a specific model number. They'll just use a more generic listing title. What I'm also noticing here is that the companion app even is different from the one that they had on their description. So not everything in this case is 100% accurate. Plus it says 1.99 inch. If we round up, it's a 2-inch display compared to, I think, 2.02 inches was their statement. Not too far off, but just a small difference. Perhaps they copied and pasted their description from another listing, so small details there aren't perfect. I will say that the box isn't quite as close of a replica as some other clones on the market, which even copies the packaging, including the Apple logo. At least they didn't do that, or maybe they saved some costs by not doing it. Regardless, inside here we have just a quick user guide. It does mention that NFC is an optional function that has a sensor located on the edge, nor is there built-in GPS, but you can use connected GPS, essentially tethering to your phone, and then the phone will track your location while the watch does the heart rate and step tracking. So in here we have the actual watch module and then the orange strap, along with a pretty similar mechanism for snapping it onto the watch using magnets and a aluminum strap there. We'll take a look in a moment, and then last but not least, just the charger, and that's it. So this is indeed using a wireless Qi charger, so you don't have to align specific contact points like on most other budget watches, but the entire thing can be positioned freely on this charger, which is actually a detail that they got right. The T800 Ultra here otherwise has a pre-applied factory screen protector and also another wrap there on the back. Otherwise, taking a quick look at this module, it has a surprising density to it. The frame, I can confirm, is indeed made out of alloy, aluminum, or zinc, so it's not quite as strong as the real titanium on the actual Apple Watch, of course, but still it's not as cheap feeling as just plastic, which is good. On the back here we have kind of a glossy polycarbonate, and then some of the accents are a little funny because these aren't actual screws, of course, but just printed onto the plastic, although it's quite smooth, and then just says Watch Ultra Aluminum and ceramic case. Otherwise, all the keys have been copied, including a shortcut for sports tracking, and then on the right-hand edge, we have the aforementioned crown, which does actually rotate and doesn't feel too loose, surprisingly. You can also press down on it, and there's a power key for waking and turning the display off, plus the microphone and speaker. And then we can slide in the aforementioned watch straps, which actually are a little bit rough there on some of those edges, but just apply a bit of force. Overall wearing experience does feel quite tight once you pop it on, and just looks pretty convincing, I have to admit. Although one other detail where, again, some rough edges can be seen would be the silicone buckles here actually haven't been pushed out by the machine or mold, I suppose. For the first time, you will have to exert a little bit more pressure to kind of push out the circular silicone end piece and kind of remove it to get the proper tight seal. And then this is the final result. Once you attach the strap, it's actually not too shabby in terms of having a little bit of this kind of curvy design. It actually leaves a little bit more room and air to flow through. Plus, not the entire strap is touching your skin at once, and just makes it a little bit more breathable and comfortable, even if, again, it's not super original. Anyways, coming back to the main watch face, we can see that the even bezel size isn't that bad, surprisingly. The irony here is I have seen worse on more expensive smartwatches. For an IPS LCD screen, again, this one isn't the OLED version, it goes surprisingly close to the top as well as bottom of the display. And after a few seconds, it also times out to a more simplified watch dial to try and simulate an always-on display, but as you can tell, it ultimately turns completely off. Otherwise, we can rotate the crown to switch through some included watch dials. Surprisingly, not super shabby looking. I also kind of like this one here. Dial here is also two directional, so you can go up and down to move forward and backwards through the carousel. So here's another digital option. This one here is another kind of fun example that we also saw on the product page for kind of moving into some slightly more analog styles here. The UI of the watch is otherwise super similar, in fact, to a lot of other generic low-cost smartwatches that we've seen the past year or so. So you can actually swipe over from the left to access a quick menu system to contact an SOS. So this will dial an emergency number that you can set in the companion app, and your 4 last opened applications will also show up down below there. You can swipe down to access any quick notifications, although you aren't able to reply back. You can also swipe up to access the quick shortcuts drawer for turning the entire screen white, using it as a quick flashlight mode, turning on do not disturb airplane mode. You can also change the style of the main menu just by tapping on the button here. There's 6 different options. So the first one, if you tap on the crown key once, is really resembling the Apple Watch, and you have all of these kind of bubbles that you're able to move around with. Although you don't get the real zoom function of the actual Apple Watch. So twisting the crown ironically goes back into the main menu, but it doesn't actually feel super unresponsive either. I've never been the biggest fan of that bubble style view because I just think it's a little hard to intuitively understand what all the icons are representing if you're new to the watch. So a list view like this I actually think works a little bit better, and on here you can actually rotate the crown and it actually works. So I personally think this one is a little bit more practical. And here is style 3, which gives you tiles that you're able to navigate up and down between. Style 4 though is a little bit silly. It's just a circular dial that you can twist on to access different applications. Not the fastest one in my opinion, and another carousel but at least labels the applications down below there, but also a little bit slow in my opinion. Style 6 is kind of a hybrid of the previous one. That's another carousel. Now in here we can see the full list of applications, including launching to the quick dialer pad, as well as a phone book if you're syncing that over via Bluetooth. You can also take a closer look at your heart rate, blood oxygen, as well as your health status for the day, corresponding to steps you've taken, calories burned, and hours of the day that you've been active and standing up, and shows you a little bit more detail. The next one over, ECG, is actually copied over from the product advertisement. It's not using metal contacts like a real ECG sensor, however it's still just using the optical heart rate sensor to give you an approximation. So just like blood pressure, it's not the most accurate thing. This one as well, it's just using the heart rate monitor and then putting it through kind of a preset calculation to give you an estimated blood pressure based on normal values, but that's kind of to be expected. Under additional sports, you're able to take a look at the current list. It's not the most exhaustive in the world, definitely shorter than the real Apple Watch Ultra, but the core apps you're able to find, and at least one function that's neat is the yellow key here can act as a shortcut for quickly jumping into a sports tracking mode. Normal tracking functions though, like heart rate as well as blood oxygen, are in fact real, and they do an okay job. Once synced with the companion app, you can also check out the current weather status as well as find your phone. Your phone will then ring if it's paired again using Bluetooth, as well as sleep time for the past night, which will reset once it reaches PM. And then what we see down below here as Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp are essentially just notifications. So it will automatically sort if you have a message coming in from the social media sources. It'll be placed into these separate folders essentially. But again, you can't really interact or reply back to those messages. Now you also have a game folder as well, although you only have one option available, but still kind of fun. And it's a function that wasn't really advertised even on the main product page. It's kind of a galactic fighter style game where you have to shoot at these enemy planes, have to avoid the incoming ammunition as well. It's a little bit sluggish in terms of the frame rates, but it is functional. So you do get also a basic calculator. This is something that we've been seeing more recently on low-cost watches, and I do like this. You can quickly type out some simple arithmetic. Breathing also will allow you to slightly relax, inhaling and exhaling with the animations here to calm down, as well as a basic calendar. Though it doesn't really sync appointments or notifications, you can at least see the current day of the week. So still quite basic at the end of the day, nothing that we really haven't seen before. But considering that this is a $8 smartwatch, I have to say it's really not bad for what it is if you just need something super basic. Now, by the way, you can also tap on the screen here to change the watch face if you aren't rotating the dial there. Although one thing is you don't really get any additional widgets on this main home screen. So in order to jump into any application, you have to go into the full menu here. Under advanced menu options though, you can trigger different commands such as pairing it with your phone and then using Siri commands if you have an iOS product. And you can also change the language, timeout settings for the screen, as well as that side button you can even program. So instead of acting as a shortcut for sports, you can set it to measure your heart rate, for example, or even go into that quick game, which is actually pretty convenient, the fact that you are able to customize this. The companion app, though, is super basic. Some of the UI elements are not the best designed things in the world and can be a little clunky, doesn't show you the most info, but at least it does sync over once you connect it by Bluetooth and turn on location services, plus start that kind of simulated ECG measurement, which again is just a kind of fake one that is just using the heart rate monitor. There's also a health index number that gets generated. What's a little bit funny is that this number isn't tied to any metrics the watch is tracking. You have to manually enter your BMI, your weight, and then body fat rate that you would know from other devices, and it gives you that score. So that metric, if they ever do update their app, I would say probably should be more inclusive of the actual steps as well as heart rate data to give you a score rather than something that isn't done on the watch. What I will say though is the sleep tracking is not very good. Like most lower cost smartwatches, it's not continuous, so it only tracks sleep during the regular hours at night. If you're taking a nap, it's not going to count that as sleep, and if you wake up a little bit too early, it will kind of stop tracking your sleep as well. So not super accurate on that metric, but also gives you a rough idea. Now on the bottom here, you can take a look at motion, which is basically starting a run from the app here that will use your phone's connected GPS. The second tab here allows you to check if there's any firmware updates, set alarms from your phone to push over, turn off certain functions, and more importantly, the dial settings. This is where you can find the claimed over 500 watch faces, and I will give them credit that it is a pretty long list. They're sorted by different folders, a little hard to read on this blue font, but there's one for holidays, which tends to be a little bit more oriented for Chinese holidays. It looks like Lunar New Year, but also Christmas, and you can find some which are animated at the very least. The watch doesn't have the largest memory in the world, so it only has room for just one watch face that you can push over at a time before overriding the previous one. The other ones that you saw from the earlier section are built into the watch by default. Certainly not bad in terms of the way that some of these watch dials look for such a low-cost device. Although I will say that the total number of watch faces is maybe not quite 500, but maybe a little closer to something like 100, 150. So that's been the $8 Temu Apple Watch Ultra clone, and I came in with low expectations, which you should also if you are picking something up at a really low price compared to the original thing. But in this case, I actually think that it's really not bad as just a super light fitness tracker. Obviously, if you have higher expectations, you need more accurate tracking, you might be a bit disappointed, but just for something that shows you time, quick notifications at a glance, and rough step as well as heart rate data, then it actually does work. Ultimately, though, this type of category is still kind of purchased at your own risk. I would probably still advise picking a lower cost smart band over this, something like the Mi Band, which you are paying maybe just a little bit more, but still falls into the budget territory of 20 to 30 bucks, and you get a more original design from a more reputable brand that also has a better warranty policy. However, again, if all you want is something that maybe is a little bit fun and more of a novelty piece that does in fact look like the Apple Watch Ultra from afar, this gives you an idea of what to expect. So thanks for watching this exploration here at OS Reviews. That's been just a quick look at this $8 Temu Apple Watch Ultra.